So hey everyone, Chelsea here. I am a youth and accessories editor at Fashion Snoops. Today we're speaking to our goodness sentiment. So our goodness sentiment focuses on what it means to be human and the fundamental pleasures of our day-to-day, really outlining the importance of becoming in tune with our senses, shedding taboos to find satisfaction in the small things. It's about reconnecting with each other to design a world based on strong bonds and mutual support and kind actions. In a society that sells us the idea of better and best, we find solace and self-love in being good enough as our truest selves. Where perfection is a far-off goal, goodness is attainable when we speak our own truth. So to speak to the sentiment of goodness, that puts a lot of emphasis on authenticity and our innate humanness. I'm speaking with photographer Andrew Kung today, who tackles the topics of identity, invisibility, and masculinity in Asian American men in his fashion narrative photo book, The All American. So hi, Andrew, if you want to go ahead and intro yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Andrew. I'm a photographer based here in lovely Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in the beautiful city of San Francisco and started off from a fairly unconventional path of photography, going to business school at UC Berkeley and working in tech in Silicon Valley at LinkedIn for about 3 years before moving here to New York and pursuing photography full time. And it's been 3 years since I've started that journey, but I haven't looked back since. I quit the days of Silicon Valley, and it's been a fun ride as a photographer, you know, starting off being a commercial editorial photographer, really trying to shoot for the biggest brands and magazines, to really discovering and finding my voice as an artist myself, not just trying to shoot for the biggest brands, but finding meaning in the work that I do and translating that meaning into a lot of the commercial and editorial work that I shoot nowadays.
Yeah, amazing. So like we spoke of earlier, you have your photo book, The All American.
Mm-hmm.
So throughout your work, you cite masculinity and identity as major points of focus, especially within Asian American men. But the images also depict a certain intimacy and kind of like vulnerability. So why, if at all, do you think these ideas of masculinity, intimacy, and vulnerability are so closely linked?
Yeah, I think one of the big goals that I wanted to accomplish with that book was really trying to almost redefine what traditional masculinity looks like today. And I think when we think about traditional masculinity, you think about, you know, the chiseled faces, elevated cheekbones, and physically built men. You know, I kind of wanted to turn that on its head into a very contemporary expression of what it means to be masculine today. You know, and it spans the entire spectrum of the gender and sexuality and ethnicity spectrum. And I wanted to turn that on its head and incorporate notions of vulnerability or intimacy in my images to show that this could look like the new normal of masculinity. It doesn't just have to be defined by the way that we just happen to know it historically. And I think that's the beauty of art and photography, is to be able to challenge some of those stereotypes, especially when it comes to Asian American men, because Asian American men historically have been desexualized and emasculated. You know, we've always been seen as the other or not American enough. And it's really been compounded by the fact of, you know, lack of representation in media and how we don't have a lot of Asian men on movie screens or TV shows. We're starting to see more and more representation now, which is great. But historically, we haven't seen that. And it's been a medium in which Asian American men have been emasculated. So I wanted to turn that really all on its head in this photo project. And by capturing more intimate, vulnerable, tender photos and images, that was kind of how I wanted to convey this new normal of masculinity.
And was this something that you were kind of like thinking about for a while, this idea, or was it something that like came to you? Was there a spark of inspiration, or was it something you were planning on doing for a while?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that was, I mean, I've experienced a lot of microaggressions growing up, even in the beautiful, diverse city of San Francisco. I still experience a lot of those microaggressions. But it wasn't until a project that I photographed in Mississippi, where I went to the Mississippi Delta and photographed a small Chinese population there, that I really started digging into my own Asian American identity. And I had more conversations with my parents, with my friends, read more literature, essays, And I came across this book called Big Little Man by Alex Tizon, where he explored his experience as a Filipino-American man growing up in the Bay Area as well. And so it really validated and put into words a lot of the feelings that I felt growing up. So I definitely felt these sentiments, but I didn't know how to materialize it into words or images. And so that book really was the backbone for me in conceptualizing this project.
Gotcha. And then kind of continuing that conversation of what the photos evoke, was it a challenge for the people within the portraits to evoke those emotions? And you speak about the taboo typically surrounding intimacy, but is that something you discussed with the people that you were photographing?
Yeah.
Or did it kind of just come organically because of the stories that you were sharing?
Right. Yeah, I think because 90% of the people that I photographed are all just friends of mine. You know, they weren't fashion models or they weren't signed to agencies. They were just friends. We would just have conversations about what it meant to be Asian American men and some of the nuances and microaggressions that we all faced growing up and even to this day. And so that conversation opened up, you know, some of these themes of vulnerability and intimacy. And I think oftentimes the starting point of building that relationship with your subject is having a mutual understanding of what you're trying to shoot and what you're trying to convey. And I think because we had a platform to talk to each other about our experiences, it really was kind of easy for the subjects to really relate to the topics and the themes that I was trying to address. So it was pretty seamless in terms of integrating that into, you know, channeling the mood and atmosphere in each image.
Yeah. And then for the All-American, you chose to shoot on medium format film. And looking at all the images, there's this like beautiful vibrancy and it's really emotive, but also there's kind of like a softness and like almost like a nostalgia quality that the film allows. Is this your preferred way to photograph? Do you do this often, and why did you decide that this was right for the book?
Yeah, definitely. I think in general, I love photographing on film because it forces me as a photographer to slow down and really evaluate the lighting, the composition, the gestures within the frame, and not just kind of doing this spray and pray kind of mentality that we have in photography and modern photography, where we just take a bunch of photos and, you know, 1 out of the 100 or 200 will come out right. I think there is a charm in that imperfection and having, you know, only 10 shots in a medium format roll to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So that is definitely my preferred method of working. And I think that allows me to build more intimacy and connection with the subject as well, because I'm not constantly looking at what, you know, images came out, or I'm not constantly showing the subjects how they look like, but it's really just focused on slowing down time and really figuring out how we can capture, you know, the best image.
Yeah, I love that you said this idea of like slowing down, because obviously within our current moment, we're kind of focusing on that and seeing the goodness that surrounds kind of slowing down for a moment. So I love that you said that. And then I guess shifting gears toward our current moment, in the light of how COVID and really just the year of 2020 in general, it's going to shape the future of basically everything. Do you have any thoughts on how your process or portraiture in general is going to adjust and adapt? Like we've seen these FaceTime editorials emerging. So have you tried any unconventional methods?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting, you know, that we've seen new mediums and different ways that people have been playing around in quarantine. I have a lot of friends who have created such amazing photo shoots of such high quality that I'm like, wow, it feels like, you know, you were there.
Yeah.
For me personally, I love the ability to interact in person, and to do it over a screen doesn't feel as natural for someone like myself. So I've been really focusing on different areas of my business. So doing things like business development, reaching out to agencies or clients right now to start building those relationships, to studying the craft. And really focusing in on like, who are the photographers that came before me? Who are the contemporary photographers? And what kind of inspiration can I take? You know, what films can I watch? What books can I read? So really equipping myself with a new knowledge bank in which to reference for my new work or for any of my images moving forward. So I've been spending a lot of time really educating myself and also looking at business development, focusing less so on the actual act of shooting, but definitely planning out, new photo series and new bodies of work.
And you said that you've been kind of like building your knowledge bank. So is that something that you feel is always important, will continue to be important during your, like, to perfect your craft? Have you learned any new ways of kind of building up that knowledge and learning?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something that I take pretty seriously because I think oftentimes photographers or artists live within their own bubble, and their bubble is who they follow on Instagram or the sites or blogs that they visit. So I oftentimes, challenge younger photographers or even other photographers to look outside of their realm and look outside of the world,
Yeah.
whether it be films that they typically wouldn't watch, photographers that they typically wouldn't study, or books that they typically wouldn't read, and just find different mediums of areas that might spark some initial interest. And that's the beauty of the artistic process, is that you don't know necessarily what you're going to get from any content that you consume, but it might spark something that might lead to, a new project or a new image. And so that's something I take pretty seriously, like from a week-to-week basis, in terms of equipping myself with that knowledge. And I think that's how, we as artists, no matter what field that we're in, can do constantly to make sure that we're looking at new things and being inspired by new content.
Yeah, I think that's also something that's even outside of the artistic realm. I think, again, during this time, we're learning that, like, making sure that we listen to voices outside of what we normally would gravitate towards and really educate and equip ourselves with the correct tools. I think this going forward, that's going to be something super important, definitely within the creative field, but even just beyond that, I think we're going to see how that is really vital.
Totally.
And so then we'll just conclude with this. Obviously, this is right now a pretty pivotal moment in history. We're experiencing this global pandemic, and then also this tireless work being done to fight injustices. So there's been a lot of divide, but then there's a lot of connection has also come out of this. So has this time that is 2020 sparked creativity, inspired any projects, or even changed the trajectory of existing ones that you were already kind of concepting?
Yeah, I think one of the things that, when COVID first started, a lot of, anti-Asian racism, was happening in terms of the Asian American community being blamed for, the cause of COVID. And I think just seeing all the unfortunate, hate crimes and the hundreds and hundreds that have been happening since the start, that has really kind of opened my eyes and forced me to really double down on the images that I want to make. Because really the images that I want to create is normalizing Asian American beauty, because and celebrating in a way that we haven't celebrated before. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, we've always been seen as the other or not American enough, or always this kind of perpetual foreigner. And so what I want to do is really celebrate those contemporary expressions of masculinity and femininity and how it constitute how we look at beauty and Asian American beauty specifically. So I think this time has really allowed me to double down on that mission and that vision that I have as a photographer, and has really fueled me to prep everything I can for my next personal body of work. And that I'm now at a point where I'm pretty well equipped to start shooting and executing. It's just a matter of finding a way once all the social distancing is over.
Yeah, once we can be in person again, once this all starts to shift to something else.
Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming to chat. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover? Anything else you wanted to say, or do you want to just end it here?
I think this was great. I loved and really appreciated the questions.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you.